Hello, my name is Professor Angela Daly, and I work here at the Chinese University of Hong Kong Faculty of Law. In this short video on internet law, I am going to talk about privacy, data protection and the law. I will give an introduction to privacy and data protection law before moving to focus on the European Union's General Data Protection Regulation, which came into force in 2018. I will then present some key aspects of data protection in Hong Kong, especially the Personal Data Privacy Ordinance. Introduction to privacy and data protection. Privacy is a right found in many constitutions and human rights treaties. In the common law world, for a long time, privacy has been conceptualized as a right to be let alone, after a famous journal article by Warren and Brandis. The idea that we did not have an expectation of privacy in public places was also prominent in common law jurisdictions. Now, following important work by authors such as Helen Nissenbaum and Paul Bernal, privacy can be considered to be more akin to a right which helps us protect our autonomy as human beings, and may apply in public as well as private arenas. Data protection is considered by many to be a subset of the right to privacy, which specifically protects data collected about individuals. Privacy is found as a fundamental right in many countries' constitutions. Data protection is usually protected through legislation. But in the European Union, data protection is recognised as a right separate to privacy in the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights. The Charter contains a separate right to privacy. Currently, over 100 jurisdictions around the world have some kind of data protection legislation. There are a couple of important global instruments for data protection. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, released a set of guidelines on the protection of privacy and trans-border flows of personal data in 1980, which were later updated in 2013. The Council of Europe, which is not the same thing as the European Union, formulated an international treaty called the Convention for the Protection of Individuals with regards to automatic processing of personal data in 1981. It is also known as Convention 108. Some countries which are not Council of Europe member states are signatories to this treaty, including Argentina, Mexico, Morocco and Senegal. Hong Kong and mainland China are not among the signatories. Privacy and data protection in the European Union. One of the most important jurisdictions internationally for data protection is the European Union. The EU recently reformed its data protection legislation by introducing the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR for short. The GDPR was enacted in 2016 and came into focus in 2018. The GDPR repeals and replaces the previous Data Protection Directive from 1995. Since 1995, the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights also came into force. The Charter includes a right to data protection as well as a right to privacy, as I have already mentioned. It is important to realise that data protection is a hybrid and even contested area of law. As Orla Linsky points out, EU data protection has two aims. One aim is to protect the fundamental human right to privacy. But data protection law also facilitates economic trade in personal data. The GDPR is a compromise between these two objectives and also reflects a compromise between varying interest groups which heavily lobbied European lawmakers during the GDPR's formulation. The GDPR applies to personal data, which has a broad definition, which refers to information relating to an identified or identifiable natural person. There are 6 legal bases found in Article 6 on which personal data can legally be processed, and the consent of the individual is only one of the 6. The GDPR contains a number of important features, including the codification of the right to erasure, better known as the right to be forgotten, a new right to data portability, and data breach notification obligations. A very important feature of the GDPR is the level of fines for non-compliance. Potential fines are now much higher than under the previous Data Protection Directive. Now, an organisation in breach of the GDPR can be fined up to 2% of global turnover. It is not only organisations based in the European Union which may be subject to the GDPR. Article 3 of the GDPR sets out its territorial scope. The GDPR purports to apply to organisations outside of the EU which are processing personal data in the context of offering goods or services to people in the EU or monitoring the behaviour of people in the EU. Data protection in the US. Many governments and businesses outside of the EU have been interested in the GDPR because of this aspect. Perhaps they are worried about complying with the law or are not sure. For some other people, they would like to have GDPR standards in their own country's laws. This is important for organisations based in countries such as the US, which has a very different approach to privacy and data protection compared to the EU. The Fourth Amendment to the US Constitution offers a degree of privacy against the US government for US citizens, but there is no comprehensive data protection legislation at the federal level in the US. There have also been lots of transatlantic legal problems regarding personal data being sent from the EU to the US related to US surveillance activities and a lack of data protection, such as the CJEU's decision in the Schrems case, which invalidated the Safe Harbour Agreement. Since the GDPR has been implemented, California has adopted its own data protection law, the California Consumer Privacy Act 2018, which is similar to the GDPR. Will other US states and federal jurisdictions follow suit? We will see. Privacy and data protection in Hong Kong. And what about Hong Kong? Well, the privacy of communications is protected by Article 30 of the Basic Law, and Article 14 of the Bill of Rights Ordinance also protects individuals' privacy against arbitrary or unlawful interferences. Hong Kong is also one of the 100+ jurisdictions internationally which has data protection legislation. The Personal Data Privacy Ordinance, known as PDPO, was enacted in 1996 in response to the EU's Data Protection Directive from 1995 and the OECD Privacy Guidelines from 1980. The ordinance was amended in 2012 and some provisions were added regarding the use of personal data in direct marketing. The PDPO protects personal data, which is defined in a similar way to EU law. It regulates the collection, use, handling of personal data by data users, a definition similar to data controller in the EU. The PDPO does not currently regulate the transfer of data from Hong Kong to other locations and seems only to apply to data users in Hong Kong. All data users in Hong Kong should follow the 6 data protection principles set out in the ordinance. There are some more key differences between the PDPO in Hong Kong and the GDPR in the EU. There are no data breach notification requirements in Hong Kong law, unlike the EU. It is possible that such obligations may be introduced in Hong Kong soon, after a series of high-profile data breaches in the territory. Individuals in the EU also have more and enhanced rights over their personal data compared to individuals' rights in Hong Kong. And the fines for breaching data protection law are now much higher in the EU than in Hong Kong. The body responsible for overseeing the PDPO is the Privacy Commissioner for Personal Data, or PCPD. The PCPD is an independent statutory body which promotes, monitors and supervises compliance with the PDPO. People can make complaints to the Privacy Commissioner if they think that the ordinance has been breached. The PCPD can also launch an investigation if there are reasonable grounds to believe that the ordinance may have been infringed. So with the large amount of personal data being created, collected and used about all of us, privacy and data protection laws have become very prominent recently. The GDPR in the EU has been a major reform to data protection law there, but it also has global impacts. Data protection law in Hong Kong is based on the previous Data Protection Directive in the EU. For some topics, like data breach notification and data portability rights, it seems Hong Kong is falling behind the EU and some other major jurisdictions across the globe. Will we see some updates to Hong Kong's data protection legislation soon? Wait and see.